Despite their unflagging zeal and commitment to their duty as Astartes, the Sun Serpents' interactions with the fraught distrust and fear. For reasons unknown, barring the Salamanders, from who they supposedly descend, the first founding chapters appear to hold the children of Se-Akatl in some measure of wariness, and in some cases, the Blood Angels and Ultramarines in particular, hostility. Why these ancient chapters would all show dislike for a single, relatively young chapter is a mystery that many imperial historians have attempted to unravel over the millennia. One of the more popular theories is that, along with the astonishingly savage and violent manner in which they wage war, the chapters that Sun Serpents call allies, many of whom have managed to garner dark reputations of their own, are the source of mistrust, for indeed, whilst the Sun Serpents are proud and stalwart, if slightly overzealous, in their protection of the Imperium, those who they count among their friends are often more well known for their fell character. The Black Dragons, Abyssal Jaws, and perhaps most terrible of all, the viciously berserk Flesh Tearers. With such infamous chapters associated with them, it is seen as little wonder that despite their best efforts, the Sun Serpents are still regarded with suspicion. Whilst their allies garner them little support among the wider Imperium, the Sun Serpents' penchant for making powerful enemies does them little favours. Perhaps their most vehement foes are the ancient Blood Angels and the bloody-handed Minotaurs. For reasons unknown, the chapter master of the Sun Serpents, Ehekatl Sitlali, holds a particular intense loathing and disgust for Mesphiston of the Blood Angels, for whilst the sons of Sanguinius are authorized to rest and resupply in the Mendoza system, the demesne of the Sun Serpents, the Lord of Death is unilaterally banned from ever entering the system, lest the children of Se-Akatl attempt to kill him. Noticeable as well is the savagely violent loathing that Ehekatl Sitlali and Asterion Malak hold for each other, whilst the revulsion that the Sun Serpents feel when dealing with the Brazen Fellows is obvious and may sometimes lead to violence. On several occasions, when war councils are called and these two chapters are forced together, Asterion and Ehekatl have openly attempted to kill each other. The gene seed of the Sun Serpents is an eternal source of bafflement to those charged with examining its purity and stability, for whilst all records state that the progenitors of the chapter are the Salamanders, every single tithe sent by the children of Se-Akatl bears no resemblance to their supposed parent chapter. Whilst stable, the Serpent's gene seed does bear several relatively minor, though admittedly rather obvious, mutations. In a manner similar to the Space Wolves and Black Dragons, the canine teeth grow into long fangs. However, unlike the two aforementioned Astartes, the Sun Serpent's fangs produce a harsh venom that can floor a man within minutes. As well as dangerously venomous fangs, the general features of a Se-Akatl Astartes tend to be flatter and more serpentine, giving them an air of cold cunning. Interestingly, as certain Sun Serpents age, they lose their hair and grow a strange fleshy crest, similar to ones found on lizards. This extremely obvious mutation has occasionally strained the tolerance of the Inquisition. However, it is extremely rare and, unlike their close allies in the Black Dragons, the Sun Serpents do not attempt to encourage this mutation in their gene seed. Of note, however, is that the Sun Serpent's gene seed overstimulates and engorges their adrenal glands, leading to increased adrenaline production. Some adepts appear to believe that this mutation may be a pointer to their heritage. However, no loyalist chapters appear to share this particular mutation. Despite their fraught relationship with a larger amount of the wider Imperium, the Sun Serpents are deeply devoted to the protection of its citizens. Despite their almost compulsive desire to absolutely annihilate the enemy in combat, the Sun Serpents take to the defense of the civilians in campaigns with relish, especially because of their adherence to several of the tenets of the Promethean Creed, espoused by their supposed progenitors, the Salamanders. Anyone that the Serpents see harming or otherwise needlessly endangering those under their protection are seen as the lowest scum, often leading to them coming to blows with other less discerning chapters. Curiously enough, this contempt for those who have massacred the defenseless subjects of the God Emperor does not seem to stretch to the savage Flesh Tearers. In fact, the two chapters are incredibly close allies. Upon learning of the battle later known as Honor's End, the newly promoted chapter master of the Sun Serpents, Ehekatl Sitlali, is reported to have said to Gabriel Seth, "Lord Seth, the deaths of those innocents lies not at your feet, for the doom that afflicts your brothers is not your making. You did not seek to slaughter them with malice in your heart. You are a true Astartes, and I am proud to serve alongside you." For all their camaraderie and fellowship, however, when the clamour of combat reaches them, the Sun Serpents go from noble defenders of humanity to violent destroyers. The sheer feral savagery with which they attempt to obliterate their foes has led many savants of imperial history to compare the children of Seakatl to the bloody-handed madmen of the 13th Legion. Such comparisons, however, are invariably made behind closed doors. Whilst the fury unleashed by the Sun Serpents against most foes of the Imperium is shocking, the sheer, almost elemental levels of rage and violence unleashed against the World Eaters is a truly awe-inspiring sight. The absolute unflinching loathing that the Sun Serpents and the World Eaters share, and the cataclysmic levels of destruction they both inflict upon each other, has led many to believe that their hatred is a deeply personal one. However, aside from the obvious betrayal of the Emperor and worship of the Dark Gods, there are no known reasons that the Sun Serpents would despise the World Eaters to such murderous extent, just as it is unknown what brought such an immense gathering of World Eaters, including their fell champion Kharn the Betrayer, to invade the Sun Serpents' homeworld and attempt to destroy them. The hatred that these foes share has often been compared to the blood-soaked and bitter rivalry between the Space Wolves and Thousand Suns, and on the Sun Serpents' part, it is matched only by their fiercely violent loathing of the Tyranids, who, like the World Eaters before them, invaded Seakatl and nearly eradicated the Sun Serpents. Before the second battle for Seakatl, later known as New Devouring of the Serpents, service in the Death Watch was seen as a punishment, fit for those Marines of ill temperament and murderous hatred, those whose control of their bloodlust was lacking, and who would readily sacrifice innocence for their own glory. After the Tyranids of High Fleet Asura ravaged their home, however, the Death Watch service was seen to be one of the highest honours imaginable. Soon, some of the chapter's most ancient and mighty warriors were being sent to the Watch Fortress, perhaps most famously of all, in an act that shocked many within the Sun Serpents, and indeed the Death Watch itself, was the volunteering of Estli Momostli, oldest and most venerable non-dreadnought-bound member of the chapter, and Master of Sanctity. Upon his arrival to the Watch Fortress, Cortez, the Lord of Sacrifice, seconded his possession to Nextlawal, chaplain of Ehekatl Sitlali's company. The Sun Serpents are curiously well armed for a relatively young chapter. Deep within their city fortress monastery are vaults that contain the means to produce older marks of armor, including the Mark III and Mark IV power armor, named Iron and Maximus respectively. More surprisingly, however, amongst their armory are truly ancient and deadly wargear, including deadly suits of Cataphracti and Tartarus pattern Terminator armor, a large host of Contemptor dreadnought sarcophagi, and perhaps most awe-inspiring of all, a trio of legendary fellblades, often seen as icons of the Sky Emperor's almighty wrath. As well as all this ancient heresy or pre-heresy wargear, there are several patterns of weaponry that are unique to the children of Seakatl, perhaps most famous of all being their complete and utter lack of any sort of bike, for, as a chapter master Ehekatl Sitlali said, "Why wait for the Martians to finish those rickety old things when we have predators that are just as fast, infinitely more dangerous, and right on our doorstep?" Instead, the Sun Serpents make use of the titanic saurians that they share their homeworld with. As well as them using them instead of bikes, the Serpents also mount thunderfire cannons on the backs of the lumbering armored beasts known as Ankylosaurus. As well as the use of saurians, the Sun Serpents have their own pattern of close combat weaponry known as Maquawitl pattern weapons, which, whilst taking the form of multiple types of armaments, from axes to swords to halberd-esque polearms, to name a few, they all share the same feature with which they are created. Using the metallic material native only to the Mendoza system, known as obsidianite, The Makwaweetal pattern weapons have savage teeth, which are brutally efficient at ripping and tearing through the foes of the Sun Serpents. Interestingly, each Makwaweetal weapon is unique. As part of the Sun Serpent's beliefs, each weapon and piece of armor wielded by every individual battle brother is seen as an extension of themselves, to be cared for and improved at their own discretion, however as a part of their maturation through the ranks of the chapter. An example of this is the ceremony of the newest light. When Scout Marines are promoted, they are taken back to Seakatl and taken to the sacred shores known as the Endless Road to the Sun, where fallen Sun Serpents are taken for burial. Once these former neophytes arrive, they undergo a ceremony where they must bury their weapons and, in effect, ritually bury their past, for now they are full Sun Serpents. Once they have buried their former weaponry, they are taken to the Forge Vaults to be rearmed with new weapons befitting of their new rank. Though the first true mention of the Sun Serpents chapter was during the dark days of the Age of Apostasy, however, there are many fragmented texts that make mention of a similar force. The documents are, however, mired in allegory and myth containing tales talking of serpents from hounds. In fact, the most complete record of these strange times is spectacularly vague. Suns cast aside, information redacted, the 12th roar, despising the renegade, they burn all traces, worlds devoured by hatred, information redacted. The renegade soldier approaches the Fireborn, seeing his light as if a sun. One reed made home by the information redacted. Great serpents rise. The returned soldier sleeps in the sun-kissed home, waiting for his god. Information redacted. Awakens to a broken kingdom, his god's work broken. Fireborn no longer lights the way. Information redacted. And serpents shine again. The sun of their conviction. Information redacted. As demonstrated by the text, solid information on the Sun Serpent's past is rare, contradictory, and often in the form of metaphorical fables that may not even pertain to the serpents themselves. For those administratum savants more interested in the cold unbending facts, the earliest mention of the Sun Serpents was the Battle of the Shrine World Macedonia IV. It was during this battle the true ferocity of the children of Seakatl was shown, as their defense of the world brought them into conflict with their ancient nemesis, the traitors of the 12th Legion, the murderously insane World Eaters. Though the fighting was fierce and many honored battle brothers died, the forces of the God Emperor were triumphant and the World Eaters were annihilated. Unfortunately for the Serpents, during the Age of Apostasy, the Imperium of Man was ruled over by a fanatical madman. Zealotry and religious slaughter wrecked the Imperium on a truly cataclysmic scale, and so, as the exhausted Sun Serpents returned to their waiting ships, the mad cardinal who ruled over Macedonia IV saw them and branded them as unholy mutants, ordering his large host of Frateris Templars to destroy their saviors in the name of Emperor. When the strike cruiser orbiting the planet heard of the betrayal and slaughter of their brothers by those they had saved, they were insensate. Sending a single message to the chapter master, the cruiser quietly slipped out of the orbit before the planetary guns could be turned on it. They would not be gone long, however. After mere months of celebrating the destruction of the heretical abominations, the skies of Macedonia IV were soon filled with uncountable numbers of ships. In response to the message informing him of the betrayal, the chapter master of the time had mustered every single battle brother to gain revenge on those who had massacred their brothers. Like avatars of divine vengeance, the Sun Serpents descended on the planet, unfathomable fury burning in their hearts. When they landed, they did so with the intent to simply annihilate the Cardinal and Frateris Templars that had betrayed them. What they found, however, turned their controlled yet burning anger into uncontrollable maelstrom hatred. The entire population of the planet, mired as they were in the mad teachings of the insane Gogo Van Dyer, were celebrating the slaughter of the demons hidden amongst men, as well as making their sacrifices further meaningless by claiming that they themselves destroyed the blood-god traitors. Such open contempt for the sacrifices of the betrayed battle brothers drove the Sun Serpents into such a murderous frenzy that in a single night the entire planet of Macedonia IV was reduced to a lifeless carnage-ridden husk. Every single priest, Templar and Savant was completely annihilated, and the world itself burned in the cleansing fires of exterminators. With their vengeance now fulfilled, the Sun Serpents took stock of the state of the Imperium. Under the tyrannical lunacy of High Lord Gogurvandir, the domain of man had descended into an orgy of brutal witch hunts and deranged self-flagellation. Seeing the madness that gripped the Imperium and the beacon of hope for humanity's survival that Sebastian Thor and his Confederation of Light represented, the Sun Serpents threw themselves into the heaviest fighting, destroying all that the mad Vandir used to continue his operative tyranny and oppose the Confederation of Light. As history shows, however, it was not the forces of the Confederation that laid low the lunatic High Lord. Gogurvandir was undone from within. His own personal bodyguards, the so-called Brides of the Emperor, convinced of their leader's heresy and falseness, executed the Raving Lord, ending his psychotic reign. In the wake of the Age of Apostasy and the Thorian Reformation, the children of Sercutl were honoured for their sacrifices and the great tragedy that thrust them into the war against Vandir. The world of Macedonia IV, having been long left lifeless since the Sun Serpent scourged all life from its surface, was turned into a monument to all those serpents killed by the lunatic High Lord's actions.